Hey, my name's Graeme and I'm the Managing Director of Myriad Services. So I'm here today to answer some of your questions that we've received around what is Microsoft 365 Business Voice and how it can be leveraged in your business. So let's kick this off. One of the first questions we got here is so what is Business Voice? So anyone familiar with the Microsoft stack would be aware there's been a voice pack available, a phone system pack available in the 365 stack that basically enables voice on Skype for Business back in the day and now Teams. So that basically, in simple terms, turns Teams into a phone system. So what Business Voice is Microsoft have now taken that licensing point and they've lowered it down and they've brought it to the Microsoft Business licensing. So that's that Business Essentials, Business Premium, that whole suite of licensing versus the enterprise license. So previously you needed a a phone system pack, and that would only be compatible with an E3, or you needed an E5, which included the phone system pack. Now, Business Voice is a voice pack that can be applied to any license that includes Teams. So that includes right up to the E3s, but right down to the Business Essentials. So really does open up this voice capability for Teams for all businesses of all sizes if you're using Teams in any way, shape or form. So let's talk about the next one I've got here is, well, how does it work? So as I said before, it's a license, it's an add-on to Teams. It puts phone system capability into Teams. So you can now, so if you're now familiar with Teams, you've been using Teams for video conferencing, you've been making video calls or even voice calls through Teams within your company or even within other companies who are also using Teams. So that's been around for a while. People are reasonably comfortable in that space. What Teams has lacked is, well, it hasn't lacked it, it's been there, but you've had to pay for it, is that ability to, say, dial in a mobile phone number, or if you've got a guy in the field you want to bring in, or you want to actually just have an old-fashioned phone conference with another vendor. Maybe you've got a meeting room that's only got an old school, one of the old star phones on the table or something like that. You can now bring those rooms and devices into a Teams call using the auto conference license, but then taking that whole phone system capability. So to answer how it works, it basically plugs the PSTN or the phone line network that we're used to with our phone systems into the back of Teams and just brings that phone system and telephone capability into Teams. So what's included in Business Voice? So as I was saying before, previously you had an enterprise license, you had a phone system pack, or you had an audio conference pack, depending what you needed, and there's slightly different price points. The Business Voice is both. So it is a audio conference license and a phone system license. Costs slightly more than what the phone system license did, but as I said before, it's now applicable to the smallest plan you can get. So right down to that Business Essential. So effectively you can get a $5 Business Essential pack, add a Business Voice pack on top, and now you've got a fully voice-enabled user. I suppose just rolling back to how does it work again, you also then need carriage. So Microsoft are not providing you the phone lines. There's a way to do that, and we bring those telephone lines in. So there's a number of telcos out there that use that, and there's a number now, as we'll include in some of these future questions, around how we can make that happen. So summarising what's included in Team Business Voice is the license to enable the phone system, all the phone system capabilities, transferring calls, managing calls, what are those things, and the right up to the border for the carriage. So then you basically need a telco to bring those phone lines into your Teams environment. So what do you need to have Business Voice? That's a fairly common question. Well, the most obvious one is Teams. And as I said before, any Teams enabled license now does it. So what you need is now, it's much broader. There's so much more compatibility. It's open to a whole heap of other businesses and other platforms and solutions that just weren't accessible for unless you wanted to put your hand in your pocket for an enterprise license, which for most SMBs is just too much. So that's what you need at a base level. You also need carriage. You need a telephone system line. So not telephone system, because it is a system. You need telephone lines. You need carriage. You need a telephone carrier, one of your telcos, to bring in that service into your environment. How do you get it in? Two main ways. So Microsoft are partnered with Telstra. So there's a product called Telstra Calling, which if you looked at the Microsoft on other countries, they have what's called Microsoft Calling. Telstra have emulated that through their unique partnership with Microsoft, which allows them to do that one-to-one licensing. The other way to do it is direct routing. I mean, technically Telstra are doing direct routing as well. They're just bundled it differently. Direct routing is more old phone system method where you have a phone system. You have, so in old school, you'd have, say, 150 handsets strewn without the office. You might have, say, 30 lines coming in the old days. It would have been an on-ramp 30 or something like that, some sort of ICN line coming into your business. And that's effectively the number of concurrent external calls you can make at any point in time. And to be honest, most of the businesses I've seen, I had a little bit of a time in telcos in the early days. Usually it's about a 25% sort of ratio to lines to users, depending on your type of business. Obviously, if you're a call center, that ratio might be much higher. If you're a hands-on business, mostly working internally, you probably get away with much less. So what it does, it allows you to change the way you license and it gives you more flexibility in how you implement voice. So the Microsoft side's the exact same, but there are options with carriers and how that works. The one thing to probably point out there is you actually do need what's called an SBC or a session border controller if you're going to use direct routing. The Telstra calling obviously includes that SBC. Thankfully now some other big carriers have actually come to the party and they've actually now hosting an SBC for you. So rather than you having to have your own SBC, which by the way, if you do want to run your own, can be 100% Azure based. So you don't have to have on-prem, which was a previous limitation. You had to run, kind of pointless to run a physical device on premise to terminate a phone call to send it back to the cloud. That's no longer needed. You can use Azure, but what again makes this more easily consumed but in that SMB market is these carriers who now host that SMB component. So far as you're concerned, all you need is a Teams environment. You need to share the credentials and whatever to bridge those two environments together, and then you have a fully functional team voice environment. So can you bring your existing number? 100%. So all it is SIP trunks terminated on SBC bridged into Teams. So if you're already using VoIP of some sort, chances are you're using SIP. Even if you're not, within Australia, I think the maximum porting time is about 14 days, depending what contract or things you have in with existing carrier. Your existing carrier may even be one of these carriers who actually supports the hosted SBC. And even if they're not, and you're willing to host your own SBC, there's an additional license involved and things like that. And it's another bit of hardware to manage. So smaller businesses, we don't recommend it, but those who may want that level of control, you can terminate almost any SIP service onto these devices. So if you've already got a SIP, if you've already got an IP service, you can terminate that directly there, or you can port your number to one of these carriers who does support it. And it's quite easily done. Australia's got some fairly open laws and things around that. So, they don't allow monopolies to hold numbers and all those sort of things. So there are no issues with that stuff. I've been through an exercise fairly recently with a partner doing this in the States. They had a lot of trouble just because of the way the telco environments worked over there. But luckily for us, our regulations, it's not an issue in Australia. Can you bring your own calling plan? The answer is yes and no. So effectively, you can choose your own calling plan. So what that means is, as I was saying before, you don't have to use, if you go to the Microsoft stuff, for example, you'll see that Telstra Voice is pushed everywhere and it's a good product and it's a good plugin, but you don't have to use it. It's not well known that you can use your own direct routing, which basically means you can partner with any telco who can terminate a SIP trunk. And if you're going to run your own SBC, then the options are limitless. If you want to use a hosted SBC, it's a slightly narrower group of telcos, but they're most of the mainstream ones. So there's plenty of options in that space. So, and there are other options on how they work, ranging from all-inclusive phone plans through to just local numbers, and no different to what you would get in any other phone system anywhere else. So what phones are supported by MS Business Voice? Well, the good thing is it's an app to start with. So it works there are apps, obviously your laptop, desktop, anywhere you use Teams now. So if you're using Teams on your laptop, you plug in a headset, or if you want to use your speakers or microphone, that's your phone. If you've got the app on your mobile phone, you can now answer those calls on your mobile phone. There are Teams Rooms devices, so you can get a device that's terminated in your meeting room, so replace that old Polycom Star phone that sits in your boardroom with a Logitech Tap or the Lenovo Hub or any of these other devices, a whole heap of devices that you have to license them, but they become a standalone user in those boardrooms or meeting rooms, and they connect directly to Teams with the video conferencing and those sort of things. Then you can interact with them in a whole lot of different ways, and that's a whole other conversation on how Teams rooms work, but they're devices that are available. You've got a reception area. I personally have found that using the computer interface with a headset is actually more conducive to things like reception, transferring phones. You can use chat to say, hey, staying with the Teams, phone comes in, you can use a chat to say, hey, I've got someone on the phone, are you able to take the call? And they can chat back, so no, I'm in another conversation, can we schedule that, or ask them to call back, whatever it may be, or put them through and let it go through to voicemail and all those other things exist. But you might have those breakout rooms, or even certain, let's say, hot desks or something where you just want a phone. Well, there's a whole host of Teams compatible SIP phones out there that'll work. There's even a heap of non-supported Teams phones that you can probably get to work, but there's more than enough supported phones. So there's plenty there for you guys to work with. Okay, so now the last question we've got here is the one everyone wants to know: how much does it cost? So as we've spoken about, it's a license, so it's a fixed cost. This is Microsoft licensing available through CSP. The price of the business voice is about $17 per license per month, versus if you take the old system of the E3 plus the phone system license is $11, but an E3 25 is between 30 plus $50 and $70 versus an E3 the business licensing. So that's a big difference. It can now be applied to a business license, which can go right back to a business essential, which is about $5, through to business premium at $29, whatever it is at the moment. So a much lower entry point. It's capped at 300 users, but that's what Microsoft calls a small business. So we're all small businesses around here now, and under that scope, I'm sure we'd all fit in that number. And that's the thing. There's a lot of businesses that have that fit that space. On top of the licensing for 365, so you have the 365 licensing, we need to add your telco side, so that's your phone lines. There's two options. There's a Telstra voice, and there's obviously the direct routing through a whole host of carriers. And if you go a self-hosted SBC route, so you want to run your own SBC, there'll be potentially an Azure subscription and the cost of the SBC on top. And that's a quote and scope depending on the size of your business. But like I said, not needed in 90% of environments. We've got a couple of major telcos now that offer that direct routing. They host the SBC, they roll the pricing in, and from all the vendors we've worked with, I can tell you it's very competitive in the market for, and no more than what you pay for a standard SIP trunk onto a physical phone system or anything else. So it really is in the same market. It has brought the cost of voice over Teams, so using Teams as your phone system, into the reach of all SMBs and SMEs throughout Australia now. So that's the last question we've got on the list. Obviously, if anyone's got any other questions, feel free to shoot them through. We're going to hold these sessions again in the future. Other topics, if you've got other fields you want us to have a chat about, more than happy to do that. And just help inform the community on what's out there and how they can use it. If you have a need or you're interested in business voice, you want to reach out to Myriad, we're here to help. We can help you with everything from sorting out your licensing, deploying the solution, or maybe you just want to have a chat about, hey, does this work for me? You've had to listen to these questions. You just want to know a bit more. Can it work? Reach out to one of our staff. We're happy to catch up and take you through that process. The telco side, obviously we're not a telco provider. We do have a relationship with a number of telcos. We're fairly unique and independent in that space. We're not going to steer you one way or the other. Certainly make some recommendations based on our experience and price, but your call. If you've got a vendor you're happy with, we're happy to work with you on that. If you don't, we're happy to make recommendations and let you make a choice and how you want to operate and how you'd like to run your business. So that wraps it up. Thank you all for joining. We're going to be doing these again. As I said, feel free to reach out and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you.